The day of Grandpa Marcus's reading started like any other day at Blackwood Books. I was perched on my usual stepladder, carefully dusting the leather-bound first editions he collected over his lifetime, when my phone buzzed with my sister Victoria's message, "Where are you? Everyone's waiting." I glanced at the ancient grandfather clock in the corner, the one that hadn't kept proper time since the 1980s, and realized I was late for my own grandfather's reading. Somehow, that felt appropriate. I had always been the family disappointment, after all. The law office was only 2 blocks away from the bookstore. But by the time I arrived, sweating in the August heat and still wearing my dust-covered apron, the rest of the family had already assembled in the conference room. Victoria, immaculate in her Prada suit, rolled her eyes at my appearance. My brother James, fresh from his corner office at his investment firm, barely glanced up from his phone. "Nice of you to finally join us, Eleanor," my mother said, her voice dripping with familiar disappointment. "Though you might have taken the time to make yourself presentable." I brushed some dust off my sleeve and took the last empty seat. Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's lawyer for the past 40 years, cleared his throat and adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "Now that we're all here," he began, pulling out a thick envelope, "we can proceed with the reading of Marcus Blackwood's last will and testament." I tried to pay attention as Mr. Harrison detailed the distribution of my grandfather's considerable estate. The family's summer house in Martha's Vineyard went to my mother. The investment portfolio, worth several million, was split between Victoria and James. The vintage car collection went to my Uncle George. With each bequest, my siblings' smiles grew wider, while my mother's perfect posture became even more rigid with satisfaction. I sat there wondering why I'd even been called to the reading. Everyone knew Grandpa Marcus had been wealthy. He'd built a successful investment firm before retiring to run his beloved bookstore. But I'd never expected to inherit anything. I'd been the only one who'd shown any interest in the bookstore, spending every afternoon there since I was old enough to read, but surely that wasn't enough to warrant a share in his fortune. And finally, Mr. Harrison said, adjusting his glasses again, "To my granddaughter Eleanor, who alone understood the true value of stories, I leave Blackwood Books, including the building and all its contents." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before Victoria burst out laughing. "The bookstore," she managed between giggles. "That dusty old shop that hasn't turned a profit in 20 years? Oh, that's perfect." James joined in her laughter. "Well, at least it suits her. Elle's always had her head stuck in those worthless old books anyway." I sat there, my face burning, as Mr. Harrison continued reading the details. The bookstore came with a small apartment above it, Grandpa's old living space, and a modest maintenance fund. It wasn't nothing, but compared to what my siblings had received, it might as well have been. "There's one additional stipulation," Mr. Harrison added, peering at me over his glasses. "The property cannot be sold for at least 1 year from the date of inheritance, or all assets will be forfeited to charity." "Not that anyone would want to buy that money pit anyway," Victoria muttered. After the reading, I slipped out before anyone could offer their condolences or, more likely, their barely concealed amusement. I walked slowly back to the bookstore, my bookstore now, letting the reality sink in. Blackwood Books had been a fixture on Main Street for over 50 years. The 3-story Victorian building, with its faded brick facade and wrought iron details, looked like something out of a Gothic novel. The large display windows were always slightly dusty, despite my best efforts, and the gold-leafed lettering on the glass was beginning to peel. I unlocked the heavy oak door, breathing in the familiar scent of old books and leather, furniture polish, and history. The store was exactly as Grandpa had designed it decades ago, towering wooden shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, connected by rolling ladders that allowed access to the highest spots. Oriental rugs in deep reds and blues covered the creaking hardwood floors, and reading nooks with worn leather armchairs were scattered throughout. It wasn't a failing business, not really. We had our regular customers, mostly academics and collectors, and the rare book restoration workshop in the basement brought in steady, if modest, income. But it wasn't the multi-million-dollar enterprise my siblings were used to dealing with. I made my way through the store, touching the spines of books as I passed. This had been my sanctuary since I was a child, the place where I'd hidden from my mother's disappointment and my siblings' mockery. While they were earning business degrees and making connections, I was learning the art of book restoration and memorizing first edition points. Grandpa had taught me everything: how to tell a genuine leather binding from a cheap imitation, how to date a book by its printing details, how to restore damaged pages without diminishing their value. But most importantly, he taught me that true worth couldn't always be measured in dollars and cents. I climbed the narrow stairs to what was now my apartment, each step creaking with familiar complaint. The space was exactly as Grandpa had left it, slightly cluttered but meticulously organized. Books lined every wall, interspersed with strange artifacts he collected over the years. A Victorian microscope, a collection of ancient keys, a brass sextant that looked like it belonged on a pirate ship. As I moved through the rooms, touching his things, memories flooded back. Grandpa sitting in his favorite armchair, teaching me about book binding. The way his eyes would light up when he discovered a rare first edition. The mysterious phone calls he'd sometimes take in his study, speaking in hushed tones about the collection. The study. I paused at its closed door, remembering how this was the one room I'd never been allowed to enter as a child. Some mysteries aren't ready to be solved, he'd always said with a wink when I'd asked why. Even after I started working at the store, even after I became his primary assistant, the study remained off limits. But now the store was mine. All of it. With trembling fingers, I reached for the doorknob. It turned smoothly, and the door swung open with a soft creak. The study was smaller than I'd imagined, with a heavy oak desk dominating the space. More bookshelves lined the walls, but these books were different from the ones downstairs. They looked older, their spines more worn, their leather bindings carrying the patina of centuries rather than decades. I approached the desk, running my fingers along its smooth surface. This is where Grandpa had spent countless hours doing what I'd never known. The desk drawers were locked, but I knew there had to be a key somewhere. Grandpa never threw away a key, it was one of his quirks. As I searched the room, something odd caught my eye. The bookshelf behind the desk seemed off somehow. I'd worked with bookshelves all my life, and something about the spacing wasn't quite right. Moving closer, I noticed that while all the other shelves in the room were packed tight, these books had small gaps between them, as if they'd been deliberately spaced. I pulled one of the books out, expecting resistance, but it moved smoothly, too smoothly. It wasn't a real book at all, but a hollow facade. Behind it, instead of the wooden back of the bookshelf, there was darkness. My heart pounding, I removed more of the fake books. They were all connected, moving as one piece, revealing what appeared to be a narrow door built into the wall. There was no handle, just a small keyhole that looked ancient. I sat back in Grandpa's desk chair, my mind racing. A secret door. A hidden room. Suddenly, all those mysterious phone calls, all those times he'd disappeared into his study for hours, they took on a new meaning. What had my grandfather been hiding all these years? And more importantly, why had he left it to me? I spent the next hour searching the study for the key, but found nothing. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the dusty windows, I finally gave up for the day. I needed time to think, to process everything that had happened. That night, as I laid in Grandpa's old bed, my bed now, I couldn't sleep. The knowledge of that door, hidden just one room away, kept my mind spinning with possibilities. What was behind it? Why had Grandpa kept it secret all these years? And why had he chosen me, the family disappointment, to inherit it? I remembered something he told me once when I was crying after Victoria had mocked my dream of running the bookstore someday. "Eleanor, my dear," he'd said, his eyes twinkling with that special light they got when he was about to share something important. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right person to find them. At the time, I thought he was just trying to make me feel better. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to tell me something more. I fell asleep that night with his words echoing in my mind, not knowing that the next day would reveal a secret that would change not just my life, but everything I thought I knew about my grandfather and his beloved bookstore. Morning light was streaming through the study windows when I made a breakthrough. I'd been searching for hours, going through every drawer and cabinet I could find, when I remembered Grandpa's collection of ancient keys hanging in the living room. I'd always assumed they were just decorative, another of his eccentric collections. But as I stood examining them, one key caught my eye. It was smaller than the others, made of tarnished brass, with an intricate pattern that matched the style of the keyhole and the hidden door. My hands trembled as I removed it from its hook. Could it really be this simple? Had the key been hanging there in plain sight all these years? Back in the study, the key slid into the lock perfectly. For a moment, I hesitated. Whatever was behind this door, Grandpa had kept it secret for decades. Was I ready to discover why? Taking a deep breath, I turned the key. There was a soft click, and the door swung inward silently, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I grabbed my phone for light and started down the stairs. They were solid stone, worn smooth in the middle from years of use. The air grew cooler as I descended, and I could smell the distinct scent of old paper and leather. The staircase ended in another door, this one made of heavy steel with a modern keypad lock. On the wall beside it was a small plaque with an engraved riddle. First comes the year when stories began, then the number of mysteries solved by one man. Finally add the days it took to create, and behind this door, your fortune awaits. I smiled, recognizing Grandpa's love of puzzles. The first part was easy, 1455, the year Gutenberg printed his first Bible, marking the birth of the modern book. The second had to refer to Sherlock Holmes, who solved 60 cases in Arthur Conan Doyle's original stories. And the last part, 7 days from the Bible's creation story. I punched in 1,455,607. The lock clicked open. What I found inside took my breath away. The room was massive, stretching under the entire building, with climate-controlled glass cases lining every wall. Inside them were books, but not just any books. These were treasures, the kinds of volumes I'd only read about in auction catalogs. A first edition of Shakespeare's First Folio, a pristine copy of the Gutenberg Bible, original manuscripts from authors like Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, and Mark Twain, each one worth millions. On a desk in the center of the room lay a letter, sealed with Grandpa's distinctive wax seal. My name was written on the envelope in his elegant handwriting. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, you've solved the puzzle and found my true legacy. What you see around you is the result of 60 years of collecting, preserving, and protecting some of the world's most precious literary treasures. The bookstore above was never meant to make money. It was a cover, a way to hide what lay beneath. While others saw a failing business, I saw the perfect guardian for these priceless works. I chose you to inherit this collection because you understand something your siblings never could. That true value isn't always visible on the surface. You saw the magic in books, not just their price tags. You understood why preservation matters. The collection is worth approximately $847 million, according to the latest insurance appraisal. But its true worth lies in what these books represent, humanity's greatest stories preserved for future generations. There's a complete inventory in the desk drawer, along with contact information for the secret network of collectors and institutions I've worked with over the years. They're expecting your call. You have 3 choices now. 1. Sell the collection and become one of the wealthiest people in the country. 2. Donate it to a major institution and receive a tax write-off that would set you up for life. 3. Continue my work, preserving these treasures and adding to the collection. Whatever you choose, know that I trust your judgment completely. You were always meant to find this room, Eleanor. It's why I made sure you grew up loving books, why I taught you everything I knew about restoration and preservation. The choice is yours now. All my love, Grandpa Marcus. P.S. The combination to the safe behind the Dickens first editions is your birthday. Inside you'll find enough cash to renovate the store and hire proper security, should you choose to continue my work. I sat in Grandpa's chair, tears streaming down my face as years of memories suddenly shifted into new perspective. All those mysterious phone calls, the times he'd disappear into his study for hours, the strange visitors who'd come after closing time. It all made sense now. My phone buzzed. Victoria calling. I ignored it. She probably found another reason to gloat about her inheritance. But now I understood why Grandpa had seemed so amused during all those family dinners where they'd mocked his failing bookstore. The next few days passed in a blur. I hired a security team, had climate control systems installed throughout the building, and began cataloging the collection properly. Every hour brought new discoveries, new treasures I hadn't noticed at first. I was examining a particularly rare Byron manuscript when the bell above the shop door chimed. Victoria sauntered in, designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Still playing with your dusty old books?" she asked, looking around disdainfully. James and I were thinking, Since this place is clearly failing, we might buy it from you. Turn it into something profitable. We'll even give you a fair price, say, $500,000. I thought about the Gutenberg Bible downstairs, worth more than both their inheritances combined. About the Shakespeare folio that could buy a small island. About Grandpa's decades-long secret mission to preserve literary history. Thank you, but now, I said, smiling. I think I'll keep running this failing bookstore. You're making a mistake, she snapped. This place is worthless. I walked her to the door. Maybe to you. But I've learned that worth isn't always visible on the surface. Grandpa taught me that. After she left, I went downstairs to the secret room, my room now. Surrounded by humanity's greatest literary treasures, I finally understood why Grandpa had chosen me. My siblings had inherited money, but I had inherited something far more valuable. A purpose. I took out my phone and called the number Grandpa had left for his network of collectors. It was time to continue his work, to preserve these treasures for future generations. After all, some inheritances aren't measured in dollars, but in the stories they let us tell. And my story? It was just beginning. The next morning, I opened the bookstore as usual. To the outside world, nothing had changed. It was still the same dusty old shop with creaking floors and slightly cloudy windows. But now I shared Grandpa's secret smile, knowing that sometimes the greatest treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for the right person to find them. Victoria still calls sometimes, trying to convince me to sell. James sends business proposals for modernizing the space. My mother stops by occasionally, lamenting my choice to waste my life among dusty old books. But at night, when the store is closed and I descend those stone steps to check on my real inheritance, I know I made the right choice. Because some things, like the magic of storytelling, the weight of history in your hands, and the trust of a grandfather who saw your true worth, are absolutely priceless.